Hi, welcome to a random idiot talks about something he's interested in for 5 hours total is probably going to be. Anyway, in FNAF 6, what do we learn? Well, FNAF 6 is an interesting one because while it doesn't have phone calls to fill us with a bunch of lore, it does have Henry's speech, Henry's insanity speech, and the blueprints. But the interesting thing is I found that when I was thinking about FNAF 6, there aren't really many theories that you can come out with it. I'll also be talking about Ultimate Custom Night, but we'll get to that in a second. There's not like a whole lot with FNAF 6 where it's really more just going over details that it gives us and then popping out a few theories, and then FNAF 6 hasn't got a whole lot. All we really learned, okay, well, the first thing was Scrap Baby, obviously at the start of Henry's speech. So you played into our hands. This job is a gift for us. We've all been gathered in one place. It's a gift for us. And then Henry's all, now we can do what we were created to do. She clearly believes that it was William who called her here, which, based on William's later line of, I knew it was a lie the moment I heard it, obviously, would at least indicate to me that whatever trap Henry had set to lure everyone here, it seemed like he was using William's voice, that he was pretending to be William. Anyway, then Henry, or Cassette Man, who wonder who he is, gives us, a long speech, but honestly, it's not a whole lot. He's like, you've not been called here by who you think. Again, he says the individual you assume. He gives us Scrap Baby's name, Elizabeth, so that's Elizabeth Afton's name right there. You have not been called here by the individual you assume, which, again, pretty much just confirms he was pretending to be William to lure them all in one place. Although you have been called, you have all been called here into this little place. Your lust of blood has driven you in endless circles, but none of you are ever going to find these children because you can't get there. Or we learn that our brave volunteer, his brave volunteer, found a job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling it's not what you want. I have a feeling you are right where you want to be. He's remaining as well. He is nearby. Everything's going to fade away. Agony of every tragedy is going to piss off. We still give up your spirits, they don't belong to you, and the dark spirit of hell is coming for William Afton, and then we learn that the puppet spirit is his daughter. Never mind the fact that it said save him during that minigame. It retcons, am I right? The one thing we can 100% be sure of is definitely retcon in this franchise is the gender of the soul inside the puppet, but yeah. His daughter carried others into her arms, was shut out, left to die, no one lifted her into their arms. Not going to be content to disappear, not his daughter. He's going to put everyone to rest. This ends for all of them. End communication. Yeah, there's not a whole lot in Henry's speech. It really only confirms that the puppet is his daughter and that Elizabeth is the name of the girl inside Scrap Baby. So, on to the more interesting part, the insanity speech. Which is not it's not a speech of him going insane. I could see how you could get that confused. It's not him having a fit of insanity. I mean, it could be, but it's not, presumably, him having a fit of insanity. It is the speech of the insanity ending, where he pretends that our character's insane in order to write them off, because they've seen all these blueprints. Despite the fact we're probably playing as Michael, so it doesn't really make sense, because who gave him these blueprints? It was probably Michael, if I had to go. Whatever, we'll get to that. I'm just going to read out the whole speech, because I don't think there's anything here that's not crucial. It's only now that I understand the depth of the depravity of this creature, this monster that I unwillingly helped to create. As if what he had already done wasn't enough, he found a new way to desecrate, to humiliate, to destroy. As if the suffering wasn't enough, the loss of innocence, the loss of everything to so many people. Small souls trapped in prisons of my making, now set to new purpose, and used in ways I never thought imaginable. He lured them all back to a familiar place, back with familiar tricks. He brought them all together. Are they still aware? I hope not. Keeps me awake at night. I could make myself sleep, but not yet. Not until I undo what he has done, and heal this wound. A wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this. He set some kind of trap, I don't know what it was, but he led them there. Again, he overpowered them. Again, and he robbed them of the only thing that they had. Again. I don't know how those tiny breaths of life came to inhabit those machines, but they will never find rest now. Not like this. I have to call them all back, all of them together in one place. So yeah, that's the insanity speech, and really, it doesn't. This is the main piece of theorizing around, but it doesn't confirm much for us. It pretty much is just him talking about follow me, right? I think we can all agree. I think it's interesting. I will say there's an interesting connection between the two speeches, because he says, what, small souls trapped in prisons of my making, and I believe he then tiny breaths of life. And then when talking about, and I believe at the beginning of this other speech, when Scrap Baby is talking, yeah, she describes them as little souls, all those little souls in one place. You brought them all together. So it is an interesting parallel that both Baby and Henry refer to seemingly children as small souls, use the term like small and little, and also the idea of drawing things together. That's a very interesting parallel. I don't know what it would mean, I just felt like it was worth pointing out. The other main bits of information we get are the blueprints. So first off, we have Baby's blueprint, which confirms that she is 7 feet and 2 inches tall, for one, and that she's 585 pounds. But there's not really anything here. We see what seems to be her scooping function, with her ability to hold a child inside, her air hose attachment, her internal ice cream dispenser, her song data bank, and an emergency stop, which is interesting but nothing special. It's called together as blueprints, I suppose. The blueprints for Freddy, Funtime Freddy. This is the one where you can really see the child inside of Funtime Freddy in one of his blueprints, which clearly indicates that the point of the Funtimes was to capture and store children. He is 6 feet tall, although I believe Springtrap is like 6'2" or something. I believe someone worked out somehow. So technically shorter than Springtrap, but God knows how tall Michael is in FNAF 3 then. But yes, I believe technically that would make William Afton roughly the same size as Funtime Freddy. That's a bit of fun. William Afton is about the same size as Funtime Freddy. Anyway, we learn that he has a proximity sensor, a grouping coordination, parental tracking, 360 pivot, voice mimic / luring, and a storage tank. What could he be storing in there? Children! It's children! And he's 350 pounds. So, there you go. Bellaura's blueprint. She's 6'2". I actually think that is Springtrap's height, so there's a fun bit of trivia for you. 347 pounds. She has audio activation sensor, deter and misdirect remote activation, C Carnival Baby Dire 07. She has balance and stability and a collision sensor, and does in fact not have a child in her blueprint. And the final blueprint should be Funtime Foxy. Does Funtime Foxy have a blueprint? I think it does. Unless it doesn't. No, Funtime Foxy has a blueprint. What am I on about? What's happening? No. Stop. Technical difficulties. That's what happens when you ad-lib everything. If you're not lazy like me, you should definitely plan and not ad-lib your videos for this exact reason, but also, I'm not making money on music. Damn, Funtime Foxy is short at only 5'9". I mean, just miles behind Baby, Bellora, and Funtime Freddy, that's all I'm gonna say. Miles behind the others. Okay, technically an inch behind Funtime Freddy, but also, he does not have a child in his. I think it's only Funtime Freddy who has a child in his blueprints. £290, also the latest animatronic. Light activation sensor, parental voice sync and replay. That's interesting. Funtime Freddy has straight up the ability to mimic voices, but then Funtime Foxy can only mimic parental voices. In fact, it sounds like you can only replay the voice lines of parents. That's interesting. That would imply that Funtime Foxy was created first and Funtime Freddy was developed afterwards with more advanced mimicking technology. And that's just curious to me. Variable scent release? What? I would assume scent is associated with memories. I could 100% see that being... that probably has use. I just never read that part of the blueprint, I guess. And remote floor anchor. See, Circus Baby Diary 07. Well, I can't, so... because that's not one of the blueprints. But the scooper is one of the blueprints. And this is how we learn that old Michael is alive and kicking. Well, we knew he was alive and kicking. This is scalable creation of ulterior presence. Excavating arm. Remnant injector. Notes. Leave trace line amount on interior. Overusage plus overexposure negates effects. That's interesting. It does imply that you can't just use Remnant to solve every problem, because too much of it will get rid of the Remnant. Remnant reservoir. Notes. When heated, no observable motion. Keeping heated tank at sustained temperature. Substance should be malleable, but no more. There is a possibility that overheating might neutralize the effects permanently. Might being the keyword. We don't know. We don't know that burning Remnant neutralizes its effects. I should also point out that Remnant is not necessarily the same as a soul or consciousness. Remnant is what allows the soul to bind. We don't necessarily know that all the Remnant in all the animatronics was neutralized, or even if it's possible to be neutralized. And even if it is, we don't know that the souls can't potentially latch onto other metal, because Remnant is possessed metal. So, in theory, it shouldn't get rid of the soul. The soul should be able to link to something else, if it wants to. But yes, this is where the idea of the FNAF 6 and presumably FNAF 3 fires come from, which we'll get to, because actually the fact that the FNAF 3 uses fire, which means that the person in FNAF 3 had to have seen that blueprint, pretty much proves the person in FNAF 3 must be Henry or Michael. Which also probably is Michael, I believe. Yes, I believe there's a story in Fazbear Frights which has the stepfather in that story, of the protagonist as Springtrap, or playing that role. Or Springtrap becoming the stepfather. We'll get to... this is not theorizing time. The final piece of really canon information we get is the remote activated simulated C. Navigational sensors, heat uplinks, and sensor override must remain connected to central server at all times or risk duplicate signature. Variable alpha to remain at 98.6. Individual emitter. Notes. Must remain connected to central server. Okay. That's inaccurate represented population audio controlled by central server. This just seems to be telling us that the RASC blueprint is probably just telling us either what was used in FNAF 3 to lure old Springtrap around, which even then would indicate that the person who found these blueprints was in FNAF 3, or at the very least, that the person in FNAF 3 had been down to the sister location bunker and had got this thing, and also therefore that William was in the thing. Or it could be what's being used in FNAF 6, or it could be both. FNAF 6 and FNAF 3 have very similar mechanics with the sound, seemingly, so it's supposed to be the same. Anyway, given all of that, let's do some theorizing. And first off, let's just talk about who was supposed to be here. Based on the whole, I don't think you want, there was a way out plan for you, I don't think you want to take it, I think you want to stay here and die. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but that line would indicate to me that our protagonist probably has to be Michael. I don't know who else would not take the escape route. And even then, Michael probably only doesn't take the escape route because he's already dead and possessing his own corpse, and I don't know how much he has to live for anymore. So, presumably... So the question then becomes, who was the job... Like, if the job listing wasn't intended for Michael, who was it? Right host. Theorist has thrown out the idea that potentially it's just any old person and he didn't expect it to be Michael because he thought Michael was dead. While I see that viewpoint, it sounds weird to actively say job listing not intended for you. If you're calling out that the job listing wasn't intended for the main character, it at least feels like you had someone in mind and someone else took it. But furthermore, it feels weird that you would think, like, Michael possesses his own corpse. There's not, like, a time between him possessing his corpse and then leaving his corpse. Like, it's instant. So it seems weird to me that we would then be saying that Henry assumes he's dead. Like, I get Michael says he's been living in shadows. But, like, again, to that effect, I almost feel like Michael had to have been the one to give Henry the blueprints. I would assume. Because otherwise we have a whole game about someone going down to the sister location bunker, and then at a different point in the timeline, Henry goes down and gets the blueprints. Which just feels weird, because there's a 30-year gap between FNAF 1 and FNAF 3. So it would, at least to me, it would read as weird for, by this point, Michael and Henry not to have matched up. It also doesn't seem like he was at least expecting to have William in this location. Like, sure, in his final speech, he does give William a little, "You're going to hell, you piece of shit," like, line. But, look, I believe William is the second person to get the second animatronic to be brought into the FNAF 6 location. So even then, it's not exactly like... Yeah, it's not like Henry wouldn't have had time, assuming he's not just ad-libbing his speech like I'm ad-libbing these videos, he would have time to alter his speech and give William a section. It just feels weird to me that if he was planning to capture William, why would your trick be to pretend to be William? I mean, it somehow works, but even William points out that, like, he didn't fall for the trick. He knows it's a lie, obviously. So maybe Henry was betting on William's pride, but that just feels like a weird thing to bet on. Because clearly Elizabeth believes that it is William who called her here, which itself just, I guess, means William and her must not have run into each other in the vents. Then William knew it was a trick anyway, so did he just tell her to go along with it? Again, that's odd to me. But maybe the plan initially was to have Michael go after William, while Henry burns the rest of the place to the ground. Is all I can really think of. Because why else would you... again, unless you're just assuming that William will show up out of curiosity, which maybe he knows William well enough to know he'd do that. But between that and the whole not intended for you thing, it feels like he must have had someone else in mind instead of Michael. And what's interesting is that person didn't want to die because he says there was a way out planned for you. Which, again, assuming he should by this point know that Michael's alive, and if he doesn't, it implies that Michael doesn't trust him at all and couldn't have gone to him after the fact. Again, in a 30-year time span that Michael never talked to Henry, it would be very interesting. And at the very least, to me, it would imply, like, this fandom idea, this idea in the fandom that, like, Henry and Michael were super close, doesn't really seem to be true. Again, either based on the fact that Henry doesn't assume Michael's here, or Michael never tells him he's alive. But again, like, it would feel weird to me that Michael wouldn't be the one to give him the blueprints in some way, shape, or form. And so, the fact he didn't want Michael to be there is interesting. Because, again, he says in the ending, I assume you will want to... You'll want to die with everyone else. You'll want to go down with the ship. I'm staying as well, we'll all die together. Why would you create a way out? Like, why would you go for the person who you assume is willing to die with everyone else? A second. Right? Why would you not, like, why would you plan a way out which potentially risks any of these monstrosities, as he calls them, getting into the office and using that escape route, potentially killing the person who you wanted to live anyway by creating the escape route, or just allowing them to escape? That feels like, to me, too big a risk to take if it's not necessary. So why would you not go with the person you're expecting will want to go down the ship and then just not create a way out? So that way there's no risk of that happening. To me, it reads as animosity between Michael and Henry. Like, not just like they don't like each other or they're not as close as you might think, but like actually the two don't seem to like each other because it does not seem like there's a whole lot of communication. Sure, Michael probably was the one to give him the blueprints from the Cis location bunker, but even then we don't know he didn't get them himself. And there's also the fact that he lobotomizes Michael. And like, he must know by the time of the insanity ending that you're Michael, which means he should know that the lobotomy wouldn't work anyway. Because in the insanity ending, it ends with, him giving them a lobotomy. And while it's technically played for a joke, so we don't know how true it is, he's at the very least, he is writing off. And again, remember, he did not assume this would be Michael. He assumed this would be someone else, some presumably regular, normal guy, or at least someone who's alive. He assumed that if they found the insanity ending, basically, his blueprints and not even his blueprints, Afton's blueprints and his speech, which, again, doesn't incriminate him or anything, as I believe Not Real Name pointed out, there's nothing incriminating about this ending. He at the very least is willing to ruin someone's life and write them off as insane, if not lock them in an asylum, if not to lobotomize him. And then even then, Michael, who was probably the one to give him these blueprints, or at least would be aware of at least some of these blueprints and some of these secrets, he's willing to lobotomize, or write off insane, or lock in an asylum, for no reason, because a lobotomy wouldn't even work on Michael. Again, to me, the fact you're allowing that to happen is very interesting. It does read to me as potentially animosity between Michael and Henry. That's why they aren't teaming up, it seems. And that's why their communication seems to be so lax that Michael put himself in the position and didn't tell Henry he was going to do it. Or didn't tell Henry he was alive in the first place. But then, where was Michael living? Presumably he still had some form of shelter all this time. He's possessing his own body, and sure, it's decayed, but you're humanoid. You could pull off being human. So why exactly would you keep your life a secret? It does read to me like potentially the two don't like each other. And while that's just a reading, it does lead to a very fun idea. If you kind of take all in all this idea that potentially Henry and Michael don't like each other, that potentially something happened, and if you maybe consider my theory that Crying Child and Sammy Emily are one in the same, and they're twins, or more accurately, that he is a twin of Charlotte Emily, and that potentially Miss Afton and Miss Emily are one in the same, and potentially cheated on William, if you were to take that theory and roll with it, maybe you could make the argument that Michael, as a teen, finding out that his mum cheated on his dad with Henry, might have had an argument with Henry at some point. And maybe, if we assume Henry was in a springlock suit when this happened, maybe he was one of the multiple simultaneous springlock failures we hear about in FNAF 3. Now, to be fair, there's very little evidence for that. It's based purely on my reading of the scenes. And it doesn't really add anything to the story, because Henry, presumably as the guy who built it, would be able to just look up, get me a springlock crank, and then they'd unspringlock him. So it's not like he'd be dead or anything, although that would be kind of like a fun idea, but it's not like he'd be dead, he would have survived the springlock failure, so it doesn't really add anything to the story, but you could make the argument that there's something that happened. At the very least, the two had an argument. and they don't like each other. Which might explain why Henry looks at Michael and goes, "We've got a lobotomized potion." That's a Duck Duck reference. And but I do think I can tell you who the person he intended to get that position in was, because I do think he had someone specific. Again, not intended for you. Reads to me as you probably should have had someone who you intended to have this position. This is not something you should be giving to any random Joe. You're gonna get a bunch of people killed, especially when this is. Okay, let's briefly talk about Henry being evil. One, he's willing to lobotomize people. Lobotomies, to my understanding, are pretty horrific as far as, like, it is a medical procedure that removes parts of your brain. It was used on asylum patients, which, again, your character is shown going to an asylum in that ending to make them docile, and it basically removed inhibitions, goals, personality. It was basically the Dementor's kiss from Harry Potter, which even the story says is like a fate worse than death. You could make the argument that Henry potentially lobotomizing people and potentially being willing to, being willing to write people off as insane, throw them in asylums for the rest of their lives, lobotomize them, and potentially throwing people who have no idea how to survive the animatronics into the pizzeria simulator might be evil. He might be giving people a fate that's, like, close to death, or arguably worse, depending on, like, where your viewpoint stands. Or he's throwing people into basically the jaws of the beast, and probably is getting people killed. So he might not be as bad as Afton, but he's probably not a good person. Like, let's not even get into what he does in the books, like when he just abandons his child to create a... Like, I'm not gonna say that there's anything wrong with creating a sentient robot to replace your daughter. I'm not gonna say that, because I've not been in his position. But there is something wrong with abandoning your son and then beating up an adult version of that sentient robot, which can, I believe, feel pain, and then killing yourself, leaving that robot not all alone with your sister, but yeah, in the books, Henry, not a great guy. In the games, honestly, seems like he might be a worse guy than he is in the book, just based on the whole, lobotomizing thing. And also, and I know, like, this is a sin of the game design, but I am going to chalk, since Henry's the one who created it, I'm going to chalk this up as Henry's fault. The Pizzeria simulator is not easy to survive. It's like, the motion detector is terrible, and you will never see where all animatronics are within a few seconds of using it, which means it takes forever, and you will probably only see one or two of the animatronics positions. The silent ventilation only keeps the temperature where it is, and you can't use the other two systems when the silent ventilation is going, so it's useless, basically. And then the audio lore can show you where the animatronics are. You might as well just be putting that around, and it's not intuitive to use by any means. So you don't, and like, you might as well be putting that around because it can show you where the animatronics are more effectively than the motion detector. And also, during the ending, Henry puts up these various images of the animatronics burning, which means he had access to cameras the whole time. And if he had access to cameras the whole bloody time, why didn't he give you, the protagonist, cameras? The fact that Henry just sets someone into this death trap and gives them, like, the worst tools to survive possible, and doesn't give them access to the cameras, which would actually have helped them, that alone should write him off as evil, because, like, he is trying, you could make the argument he is trying to get people killed here. When Elizabeth says that this was a gift, she's not entirely wrong. It kind of is a gift. Because it's not very well designed, and I refuse to believe that anyone would be able to legitimately survive that within a week of doing it. Especially someone unprepared. But I do think that Henry at least did want to get in someone who potentially might have known what they were doing. I know, shocker. First for Fazbear Entertainment, really, but I think that the person who was supposed to come in, like, the only real person who's still alive. Oh, I didn't even mention this for Henry being evil, but in FNAF 3, Phone Dude says that it was a previous employee who told him about the back rooms. My interpretation was that it would be it could be the Bite of 87 victim, because he could make sense to, to have been he's the only living previous employee who we know about who isn't Michael Afton. Michael Afton wouldn't sell out, wouldn't potentially risk anything getting free, but maybe the Bite of 87 victim having lost their frontal lobe, and the frontal lobe, like losing or damaging the frontal lobe, can cause major personality changes, usually for the negative. I believe Matt Pat had a theory at one point that losing the frontal lobe would actually lose a lot of your emotion. It would make you closer to a sociopath, because that's the part of the brain that deals with compassion and emotions and all that. So, it's 100% believable that the Bite of 87 victim would have potentially given these secrets over. And it's not like he knew that William was in a back room. But I don't think the Bite of 87 victim or Michael would know about the back rooms of Freddy's. Right? Do we know that they know about the secret hidden back rooms that were boarded up? The only two people that we know would have known about that is Henry, because he probably ordered for them to be boarded up, and he's in a higher position of power. Hell, he owns the place. And Phone Guy, who's dead. So you could make the argument that it was potentially Henry who told Phone Dude about the boarded up back rooms. And if Henry, again, the back rooms would have had to have been boarded up after William's Springlock failure, and probably, if I had to guess, it would have been Henry's response to the Springlock failure, with him being like, we've got to lock these up. So for Henry to then go and potentially have told someone about these back rooms mean that you could make the argument it is Henry's fault that William got free in the first place. Maybe the Bite of 87 victim or Michael did know, and needed some money, or wanted to help this guy out, or whatever, but, kinda seems like the most evidence most potentially shine a spotlight on Henry, potentially being the reason Afton was freed, and not even necessarily accidentally. So I'm not going to say that Henry is 100% in cahoots with Afton, or is, evil or anything, but, he's getting there. He's getting close. But I can't prove that he was the one who told Phone Dude, and it could just be some other employee we don't know about, to be fair. Or the Bite of 87 victim just did know, and would have told them. I mean, if you believe my not even a theory, really, it's just a headcanon. The Bite of 87 victim was the Freddy mask, because the Bite of 87 victim would have been using the Freddy mask. Watch my FNAF 2 theory, but basically, the Bite of 87 victim wouldn't be Jeremy Fitzgerald, it would have been a second employee working a summer job. Jeremy Fitzgerald is then the phone guy coming in after the place closes down in winter, and then, Fritz Smith is Michael Afton when phone guy goes away to start work on FNAF 1 or whatever. So, presumably, that would make it so that... But presumably, the Bite of 87 victim would have been using the exact same gameplay loop as Jeremy Fitzgerald, so would have been wearing the Freddy mask. And so just from a symbolic standpoint, and maybe even a reason why, because I believe the toys were maybe somewhat influenced by Afton, the way the originals are in the book and film. So potentially maybe Afton had them attack him because he's one of the people responsible for his son's death. But I don't know, that is more of a headcanon than anything else. Either way, the Bite of 87 victim, I think, is a very likely candidate to have been the person who was supposed to be here. He either bailed or realised, actually, the last time I worked a job at a Freddy's didn't go so well, I'm not doing that. I mean, I will say that the reference to a lobotomy in FNAF 6 and Insanity Ending, technically, to lose his frontal lobe, because your frontal lobe doesn't just get damaged and then, fall off, it would have had to have been removed via a lobotomy. So the reference to a lobotomy in the Insanity Ending could be implying, hey, the Bite of 87 victim was who was supposed to show up, they would have wanted to live because they'd still be alive. And presumably, if they lost their frontal lobe and don't have, they wouldn't be the type of self-sacrificing person, right? Maybe that's just why they gave up. They were like, actually, I'm not risking my life for this. So they bailed, and suddenly Henry had to scramble to get in a new person, and Mike took the job. And whether or not Henry knows Mike took the job, or if he was just putting up posters and it happened, and Mike happened to apply and he just didn't know until later, it could go either way. But yeah, I do think that that's that. Well, what else is there really to say about FNAF 6? Oh, of course. Mrs. Afton is the one in control of Modern Freddy, obviously. Okay, but let me. So I obviously believe that Miss Afton's soul is inside of Ballora. I don't see any good counter evidence for that. I think that the fact Ballora is possessed, the fact that she has a song about her dead kid, the fact she's commonly associated with mothers, most likely Mrs. Afton. To me, it feels likely. And so what you'd be talking about, right, is potentially Molten MCI. We don't know, but I will say that Henry references Follow Me in one of his speeches, and then, which again implies he knew that William was spring locked in that back room, which means if he's the one who told Phone Dude, he's 100% responsible for letting Afton out and is probably in cahoots with him. Anyway. Although he does say he unwillingly helped create the monster of Afton, so there is that. But yeah, I could. Assuming Molten MCI or Molten Funtime. Funtime MCI, sorry. If it seems likely to me that Miss Afton as the adult, like, in that situation will be in control, like, they kick out Elizabeth, and potentially, like, they could only be parts and pieces of the souls of the original missing children. So potentially I could see a world where the full soul there that is Mrs. Afton, like, they found a reason they could get rid of Baby, and it's because they've realised they had another full, complete soul. And I could also just see a world where Miss Afton is kind of the adult spirit. It seems likely that she would be the one in control. After Elizabeth, seemingly. And that maybe she's the one who kind of ordered this coup against Elizabeth, but yeah. That's... But yeah, there's not a whole lot of evidence. It's just that we know Ballora would obviously be inside of Funtime Freddy. Or Molten Freddy. And Molten Freddy, obviously. I think Molten Freddy's most famous line is, one big happy family. Which could imply that, Miss Afton, commonly associated with motherhood, could be the one saying, big happy family. Yeah. I mean, what's there really to say? If you believe Miss Afton possesses Ballora, you believe she's in Molten Freddy. It's just whether or not you believe she's leading the charge, or if it's Funtime Freddy. And then Funtime Freddy is probably just missing children's souls, so it's like, yeah. Is it a bunch of souls kind of clamoring together, or is there one head soul, and then who's that head soul? To me, I think Mrs. Afton just would make sense to be in control. And again, one big happy family doesn't really strike me as a... I mean, it could just be a reference to all of the fun times being fused together. But, Miss Afton's family would be here. You'd have Elizabeth, you'd have Afton, you'd have Henry, you'd have Mike, you'd have Charlie. Like, the family would be here. This would be one big happy family being burnt alive at the end. Interesting. There's a candy cut stuff down there. Also, if we're talking about the Insanity ending again, when he says, I know some people have interpreted it as he created the Funtime animatronics. I don't think so. I think that when he says, these creations I made, now set to new purpose, I think that what he likely means is either to hide children's bodies. Keep in mind that FNAF 1 or toys or whatever killed plenty of innocent security guards. FNAF 1 especially, we just know other security guards outside of Phone Guy and Mike have died. They've done plenty of violence. The toys, I believe, were under Afton's influence to some extent, at least. So the idea of being set to new purpose, hiding bodies, murder, being vessels for the children's spirit. Being vessels for the children's souls to potentially inhabit. All of those could be set to new purpose, used in ways he never thought imaginable. Again, could mean being melted down into Funtime MCI. It could mean a million things. again, could just mean killing people, being used as bodies for spirits. Like, it could be about anything, really. He then, later on, is talking about... I think it's interesting, because it seems like, well, he does mention other things, like considering suicide, but not yet. He needs to lure everyone together. Like, throughout most of the dialogue, he's talking about one thing. He found a new way to desecrate, humiliate, and destroy. It seems to be potentially a log he made right after finding out about Follow Me, although, hard to say. He's clearly talking about Follow Me. He found a new way to desecrate, humiliate, destroy. He lured them back again. These creations I found. It seems logical to me that every time he goes back to this vague language, what he is talking about is Follow Me. Therefore, he would be talking about the FNAF 1 animatronics. It doesn't seem likely to me that he would go off on a tangent and start talking about the fun times, only to then circle back to talking about Follow Me. Like, to me, it makes sense. He's talking about Follow Me, and as and when necessary, like, he's saying, oh, the way these animatronics have been used, what happened to these children, it keeps me awake at night, I could make myself sleep. It's only now I understand the depth and depravity of this monster. But throughout the whole thing, notably, he is, like, when you take the bits and pieces, it's easy to say he's talking about, like, the fun times. When you take the thing in its entirety, when you take the entire speech and realize that he is seemingly talking about one thing the entire time, it becomes very clear he's talking about the FNAF 1 animatronics, and I don't really see... You could say he built the fun times, but I would say the fun times were built by Afton Robotics. It seems unlikely they wouldn't have been created by Afton. And I don't see a reason to say Henry made them, really. Because it doesn't even seem like he's talking about them in the Insanity speech. It really does strike me as him talking about the FNAF 1 animatronics the whole time. And he never really goes off it, he just takes a few side tangents here and then, which are more for the sake of us, the audience, realizing the kind of mental state he's in. But, his Insanity speech is not, like, this monster I have created. As if what he is, he found a new way to desecrate, to humiliate, to destroy, as if the suffering wasn't enough. Small souls trapped in prisons of my own making, now set to new purpose. He lured them back with familiar tricks, back to a familiar place. He brought them all together. Are they still aware? He'll need to heal this wound. He set some kind of trap. Like, he does go on side tangents, but ultimately he even goes from, small souls trapped in prisons of my making, now set to new purpose and used in ways I never thought imaginable. He lured them all back to a familiar place, back with familiar tricks. That never happens to the fun times, and that is just a run-on sentence, or two sentences next to each other. Like, it's not... that is not me skipping over anything, and then later he goes back, again, to more describing of Follow Me, to more... he starts, middle, and ends with describing Follow Me. So I think he's just describing Follow Me. And therefore we'll be talking about the FNAF 1 animatronics the whole time. I don't see a world in which he's talking about the fun times for one sentence and one sentence only, and then immediately switches back to Follow Me when he's talking about Follow Me the whole time. That, to me, would not read as... That doesn't read as making sense to me. And it feels like you're... And for what reason? What reason does Henry... Is there to say that Henry built the fun times? And none. To me, anyway, none. Because it just strikes me as being too... It's too much of an assumption and not enough of a payoff. Like, William building the fun times doesn't give you a whole lot of anything, but it requires you to make quite a big assumption that he's randomly talking about the fun times in the middle of this big speech about Follow Me, right next to a sentence about Follow Me, that seems to be following on from the idea of the sentence that would presumably be about the fun times. I think it just makes more sense to be talking about the FNAF 1 animatronics. Personally. I don't think that... let's talk about Lefty. Lefty has the puppet inside. But, okay, and tell me if this sounds familiar, but Lefty is the more lore important secret fifth animatronic, secret second bear animatronic of an animatronic band that has Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica. Now, just randomly, for no particular reason, how would you describe Golden Freddy? I might describe him as the secret fifth member and secret second bear of an animatronic band who's more lore important than its bandmates that consists of Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, Chica. A Lefty fills a very similar role to Golden Freddy, and his purpose is to capture the humanoid, roughly human height, presumably, puppet. So what? And he's the only one who we don't see get torn apart, and follow me. So, all I'm gonna say, I'm gonna throw out an idea. What if Lefty is made out of Golden Freddy? What if Lefty is an altered version of Golden Freddy? I mean, he's a spring-lock suit. He's designed to have people inside. Lefty's designed to hold people inside. And again, if we go off of my theory, that Charlie and Sammy are siblings. Twins are supposed to... Well, I mean, Charlie and Sammy are twins, but, you know, if Sammy is Crying Child, is Cassidy Afton, is Charlie's twin, then technically twins are supposed to have a psychic connection, and Lefty is supposed to track down... Lefty is supposed to track down Charlie. Okay, Lefty is supposed to track down Charlie, and yet Lefty, to my knowledge, I forgot to override his blueprint earlier, that's fine. Don't worry about it, that's fine. Doesn't have a tracking feature. He has navigation sensors, a false sensory output, bracelet's code, emit security frequency, dream wand, soother, use lullaby index. Yeah. He doesn't have a way to track the puppet. He has the ability to output a frequency that presumably is the same frequency as the bracelet that Charlie was wearing when she died, the one the puppet's supposed to react to. So it has a way to lure the puppet to it, and then it has the dream wand, and it has navigational sensors similar to some of the fun times, where it can, navigate. Wait, navigational sensors is not in the same way as everything else, I guess. But it is interesting to me that he doesn't have any kind of... He doesn't have a way to navigate the puppet in his own right. Maybe that's because he was made from an animatronic that had a twin in, and if ghosts exist, why wouldn't we assume that maybe twins do have a psychic connection? Okay, admittedly, that's a bit of a stretch, because if he's luring the puppet to it, it's possible he might know about the puppet's reaction, so he might have senses that just aren't mentioned in tracking the puppet. But, also lure encapsulate. Lure encapsulate, use, transport, and extra. Oh, fuse. Lure encapsulate, fuse, transport, and extra. Okay, that bolsters my theory. Also, I didn't talk about the lore minigames because I'm stupid like that. Fuse. You know what else could fuse with people? Springlock suits, when they springlock failed. That to me strikes me as the way it would fuse with the puppet, right? It lures it in, and then it performs a springlock failure-esque mechanism, fusing the puppet into the suit to travel. And then plays presumably the same thing we hear in the music box in FNAF 2. I mean, yeah, but that to me would be very compelling evidence. Also, I believe Lefty's model and the model of Golden Freddy in AR are kind of similar. I mean, all Freddy models are going to be kind of similar, but I believe the kind of body was similar. So that might be it. Admittedly, that's just so that Crying Child, and I guess also Vengeful Spirit, because Vengeful Spirit might not necessarily be part of Modern Freddy. But at the rate, Crying Child would also then at least be here. And again, Golden Freddy otherwise gets no real conclusion. Like, the souls are supposed to have been put to rest in Happiest Day, but then Vengeful Spirit is not put to rest, even after FNAF 6, honestly. Because it's their ultimate custom line. Also, I guess, yeah, if Golden Freddy having been turned into Lefty, is here and burnt. Not only does that mean the crying child could potentially have actually been put to rest, but also then the vengeful spirit could, fuse itself onto Afton a bit easier. Although, again, it could have been part of Molten MCI. Molten MCI is it's one of those theories where I'm it could go either way. It could be true, it could not be true, and every theory has that, but there are some theories where you're I feel strongly about that, I'd be surprised if it's not true. And there are some theories where you're I have no chance in hell. Molten MCI is really one of those theories where I see the evidence for it, but I'm also just not 100% compelled, but then I also kind of like it, but then I also kind of don't like it, and it's... The evidence for it largely comes from Candy Killers, 5 things becoming one thing, which is, yeah. And then also, I guess... But that's kind of, to my knowledge, that's it. We do see 4 animatronic Endo 01s in the same place where Ennard gets burned in a burner in FNAF Help Wanted. Yeah, I guess that, I don't know all of the evidence. I've never done too much research into Molten MCI myself. It's kinda there. For me, it's one of those theories where I'm I see it, I do, I'm gonna treat it, I'm gonna work off of theories with it, but I'm always gonna be somewhat hesitant, and I'm gonna be willing to pretend. It's just that if, the fun times are clearly possessed, so if Molten MCI isn't, or Funtime MCI isn't true, it then means there's a whole bunch of other souls that we then have to take into account, and I'm already, I think in my first video I suggested that there could have been 2 other missing children incidents, so we've already got too many souls here. I think that was based off of the fact that the Foxy Go 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 minigame could not have been the original missing children incident, because they got stuffed inside of the suits, and therefore there's no way they were stuffed inside of the suits in, I believe, either 2 and 3 or 3 and 2. And so there's no way all 5 of those bodies were in front of Foxy, in Foxy's show. Meaning that for Afton to have killed 5 people in the FNAF 1 location and to have put them all in front of Foxy to mocking, smile at him, basically, would mean he would have had to have killed 5 people at the FNAF 1 location. Which maybe they're then the spirit of the game. That's just each generation of animatronic has a set of dead kids with it, right? So you have the original missing children, and their pieces and parts are put into the toys, and that's where the toys are going, and then we can expand on that another. But basically then the toys are going because it has parts of their souls in, and then a second set of dead kids comes in, and then Afton comes in and infuses them with acne or whatever. Makes them all act weird. By the way, some victim happens, etc, etc, etc. Move on to FNAF 1. Again, knowing that they were refurbished initially, I would assume that then a third, the Wizards do not look like their fixed counterparts necessarily, so presumably they were quite refurbished. So potentially then, Follow Me happens. Oh no, they're missing their endos. We'll bring in the original endos, or Afton takes the original endos when they were being refurbished with Endo 02s for the FNAF 2 location. And then the FNAF 1 location, they just put new Endo 01s in. And the original missing children and some victims are clearly still there by FNAF 1, but potentially the third set are dead, or have moved on because they've spring-locked William, because he tore them apart. It could make sense. I wasn't. But that's getting into a whole thing now. Back to FNAF 6, it's do I believe Molten MCI? They took out the Molten Freddy blueprint, so I don't know, I can't say for sure that I believe or don't believe Molten MCI. As for the minigames, I mean, we see Save Him from a different perspective with the security puppet. We learn how Charlie's soul got inside the puppet. I mean, great, but... And then... technically she's not confirmed to be called Charlie, by the way. we only call her that because the books call her that, and we know she's Henry's daughter. And we only know he's called Henry, really, because of the books, but his audio files in the Insanity ending are HRY223, which is Henry 2023. 2023 is believed to be when FNAF 3 takes place, so it could mean that FNAF 3 and FNAF 6 take place in the same year, which is the assumption I'm going to work off for now, is that FNAF 3 and 6 take place at the same time. That to me makes sense. Yeah, we see Susie getting lured away with the whole dog thing. And then there's Midnight Motorist, but before we get to Midnight Motorist, can we please talk about Afton's goofy design and the fact he's missing an arm? Because I'm sorry, it does not seem to me like his... I'm acknowledging most of the theories in this do not have a whole lot of evidence behind. I understand that. Really, I do. That most of these theories are not, for the most part, they're inconsequential and don't matter to the overall lore. And I've really just been saying them for the sake of getting thoughts out there. Padding the runtime of this video, if you know what I mean. Money, cha-ching, cha-ching, am I right? But, I want to get every thought out there, want to solve FNAF 6, but I do think that Afton missing his arm could, because I highly doubt he lost it in a fight to a coyote or something daft like that, for him to be missing his arm, it feels like he would have had to have taken the arm off. And knowing that possessed metal, can be melted down into remnant, and knowing that there are circuit boards, and I have not recorded my security breach video yet, but I know what I'm going to say in that video is that I believe Glitchtrap is William Afton's soul. So, what if, and we know Glitchtrap will scan from circuit boards, what if William, who, again, knew full well that FNAF 6 was a trap, as he says, he tells us he knows it's a trap, what if he created a failsafe? Because also AR, and I'm going to talk about AR, I think just all the new generation of games after FNAF 6 and Ultimate Custom Night will be talked about in their own kind of comprehensive video. It's going to be a long one. But AR probably should... The fact that Springtrap is an animatronic, and these animatronics are physical animatronics, in AR they are not AR animatronics, they are physical. And I believe there's an email in that game which is ew, this suit smells disgusting, which is kind of Springtrap's coming to the game. If the Springtrap, and it has to be the Springtrap, I don't think there's a world in which they just springlocked a real person. Well, I mean, another person inside of a Spring Bonnie suit that they made, just to be able to say, we're selling Springtrap. And Springtrap shouldn't even be an officially company-recognized person by this point, so animatronic by this point, so it feels like it has to be the Springtrap. Admittedly, the sister location animatronics do appear, and the FNAF 1 and the FNAF 2, but we know they've kind of been remade by the company, and while, yes, Elizabeth, or Baby, I believe, does have green eyes in AR, I'm willing to put that down to just, she's been rented out, people have seen her with green eyes, there might be photos of her with green eyes, they were building off of that, their version of Baby is fake. Because otherwise Baby and Springtrap exist at the same point, at which point that has to be after. And that has to be after FNAF 3. And I think pretty much everyone agrees, FNAF 3 and Sister Location are not taking place at the same time. Regardless of where you believe Sister Location takes place in the timeline, I think we all agree it does not take place after FNAF 3. Anyway. Yeah, okay. Which would mean, but for even Springtrap, the real Springtrap, and I feel like it has to be the real Springtrap, it's Springtrap is the only one they couldn't have remade, I feel, for AR, for their renting out animatronic services. I feel like would mean that AR takes place in 2023, right, between FNAF 6 and FNAF 3. Which is interesting from a timeline perspective. The AR probably takes place a lot earlier than we all think it does. And also means that Glitch Trap should already have been in circulation after the events of FNAF 3. So yeah, I do wonder if maybe William was putting his soul into things, and maybe that's why he lost his arm. He took his arm off, melted it down into remnant, and injected it into circuit boards. And then Glitch Trap gets into their system and all that. Could be interesting. That's just me trying to explain why he's missing an arm, because how else would he be missing an arm? But honestly, his design is so goofy that it doesn't really matter. Now let's get on to the big stuff. Midnight Motorist. I've been putting it off long enough. I briefly mentioned Fruity Maze that shows us Susie's death, and that she was lured away with a dead dog, but it doesn't... That doesn't matter. What does matter is Midnight Motorist, and if I'm saying I solved FNAF 6, I've got to solve Midnight Motorist. Midnight Motorist should just be a simple game. Someone returning home and being an asshole to their kid. It really shouldn't be that complex. It should not be the thing that has left lore finders such as myself wondering what it means for years now. And yet, it is. Why? Because FNAF likes to be strange. The main consensus at the moment is that it's William Afton. Coming home in his purple goddamn car that we saw him kill Charlie with the night after, as the music is called, being an asshole probably to Mike, because by this point Mike would have killed Crying Child, or maybe he's being... The problem is that there's, spring lock suit footsteps outside of the house. Which would indicate then that, Afton lured someone from a house. Doesn't strike me like it would have been Henry's. And also, technically, we know where the Afton house is. It's right next to Fredbear's. Fredbear's, which... So, But the landscape could have changed, and also, Scott can't even keep colours consistent. Let's not ask him to keep a landscape consistent, but... I like MatPat's interpretation. I'm going to give an interpretation of my own, but I do think the one I'm leaning towards right now is MatPat's interpretation, that it's just Michael being tormented by the spirit of his brother. Which leads into my theory that, Crying Child himself might naturally be kind of evil. He would have... who else? We know Michael, I guess, looks like his dad, but... Maybe it was Crying Child who set them on Michael for no reason other than he could, and he felt like it, and he wanted revenge. And if Crying Child was involved... Yeah, because Henry says in his insanity speech, I don't know what kind of trap, and we know that the trap was Funtime Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy lures them all to the back room, where William then dismantles them and overpowers them. And... at the very least, Henry does not seem to think that this was a good thing that allowed them to take down Afton, so potentially, if Shadow Freddy is, at the very least, a creation of Crying Child's agony, and a shadow version of Fredbear and Golden Freddy, yeah, I guess that could. I guess he could have been helping his dad, and if him and Afton already, well, they're both Aftons, but him and William have been working together already. That's interesting. And he probably knows it's Michael because he says it's me. So if he knows that it's Michael, that's curious. That's interesting. If he knows that it's Michael. Okay, if he knows it's Michael, he could have told the other spirits to lay off him, but he didn't. Which, yeah, could mean he was just trying to get revenge. Maybe he's... Yeah, I mean, it would make sense. Michael did kill him. And he could have been Yendo. Maybe Crime Toad's in more places than we think. And he could even be an Ultimate Custom Night, because there's a Fredbear jump scare in that game if you use the death point on Golden Freddy. And Fredbear, Golden Freddy would be Golden Freddy by the time the vengeful spirit was stuffed inside of him. You know, Fredbear would not. Fredbear would have been out of commission and would be Golden Freddy by that point. So the only person who could be bringing Fredbear to this game, if we assume it does require, as a secret jump scare, would have to be Crying Child, because he's the only person who's ever actually possessed Fredbear, which is why I then say that Shadow Freddy is probably, at the very least, Crying Child. Maybe a combination of all the ghosts of Golden Freddy's agony, possessed by the ghosts, Dark Remnant, but at the very probably Crying Child, because it does seem like it has a Fredbear form, again, in Follow Me. If it has a Fredbear form, that is interesting, because potentially it could mean Crying Child is even a villain in this franchise. Huh. And then he's in Ultimate Custom Night, maybe. Which could explain how well he gets out of Ultimate Custom Night. Interesting. But, okay, I've been putting it off enough. So, yeah, I guess I like Pat's idea then that Midnight Murder is showing us a Michael tormentor. Who exactly the grey person would then be is unclear. The person who speaks in grey in that minigame is. But it could just be an aunt, an uncle, a neighbour, a babysitter, grandma, granddad. It doesn't really matter who it is. To the point where it's law breaking or anything. It could be anyone. And honestly, knowing, based off of Bellora's song, that seemingly William is the type to throw himself into work after loss, it doesn't seem totally unreasonable that he would have been relying on someone else to take care of Mike during the day when he's working, throwing himself into work, maybe. I like that, but I will at least throw out my own interpretation. What if Orange Guy is Phone Guy? What if the purple car is a red herring? What if his kid is one of the missing children? It might sound insane, but it makes sense why you would talk about Freddy's as that place. He, presumably as the security guard, would know that at least suspicious things are happening here. Bad things are happening here. No, it's bad. Which could work. Right? If he knows that children are going missing, he wouldn't want his kid near it. He would talk about it as that place. And maybe Afton would go. And we know that this kid isn't Susie because they're referred to as him. Right, he's going to that place again, so. And Susie was the first. It could be any of the other four then, but at the very least, one kid would have gone missing, so that's enough for at least Phone Guy to have been, all angry. Maybe the purple cars are company-issued cars, and William was using a company-issued car so that he couldn't be tracked back to him by a number plates or anything like that. So, in that case, the purple car could even then make sense that way. The fact it doesn't line up with how the house looks, where the house is in FNAF 4, which is close to a playground and seemingly in a town. Makes sense, because it's not the FNAF 4 house. It's Phone Guy's house. And then the person on the couch could just be, his wife or something, and then he could be going to the local bar. Admittedly, there's still things like the mound of dirt, what would that mean? And, and then maybe, Afton, who would have presumably built trust with this kid, would then have lured him back. In this idea, I believe I even said that, like, Fritz, who's usually depicted as being ginger, or at the very least having freckles, which, you know, I believe Fritz is usually depicted as being ginger. But I think in every piece of media he's been depicted and he's been ginger. Fritz, regularly depicted as being ginger, having the mustard man or the orange guy, depending on what colour you want to say he is. He could be yellow or orange. You could make the argument either way. You know, orange hair, orange guy. Plus, Fritz possesses Foxy, and the one thing we know about Phone Guy is Foxy is his favourite. And also, interestingly, it's Foxy who, Foxy's the one who can see through the Freddy mask. Like, Foxy's special. So, yeah, I can see it well. Maybe that's because he knows to listen to the tapes because his dad is Phone Guy. Maybe. Then that can maybe explain. Although the animatronics kill plenty of innocent security guards, so it doesn't really need to be explained, but maybe it explains why they kill Phone Guys. Fritz is like, hang on, that's my dad. He was an asshole, let's kill him. But, I don't believe that anymore, but it's a theory that I had. It was, like, really my first proper FNAF theory. It was a theory that I was spouting in comment sections, and so I'm quite, you know, I'd be remiss. It would feel disrespectful to my old self not to bring it up in this video. But yeah, I do personally just buy into Mattbat's theory a lot more, that this is kind of a crying child possessing Fredbear, who's tormenting Michael and leading him to his own grave, and that we're actually playing as William. That makes sense. And then feels like it's not really showing us anything too special, just maybe the middle ground between Bite of 83, or I guess like Crying Child dying, which is the bit after Bite of 83, and then the Nightmare Experiments. You know, it could be showing us maybe the middle point of that before William had fully worked out that Crying Child's souls are. Maybe that's even how he found out about souls, you know? He saw Michael would complain to him about these, you know, animatronics showing up and stuff. He'd notice, like, these footprints leading to the pavement or the window, and he'd be like, okay, maybe Crying Child's soul is actually still around, and that's when he starts experimenting on Fredbear. And, like, puts him inside of Yendo, and puts him inside of, and, you know, the nightmares and all that. Could make sense, could work, it could just work. And I think I'm pretty sure that's everything for FNAF 6. I mean, we've gone over the fact that he is almost certainly talking about the FNAF 1 animatronics in the Insanity speech. We've gone over how the Bite 87 victim could have been who he wanted to be there instead of Mike. Maybe that he doesn't like Mike. We've gone over... Yeah, I think we've gone over everything. We've gone over Midnight Motorist. We've gone over all of the endings. And we're told the names of the missing children. Fritz, Gabriel, Susie, and Jeremy. Jeremy to Bonnie, Gabriel to Freddy, Fritz to Foxy, and Susie to Chico. And we don't need to be told Michael Brooks, because the books tell us. Which is the same logic we're using for Charlie, so I don't see any reason not to trust the books there. And yeah, we're gonna... yeah, I think that's everything for FNAF 6. I'm just trying to... yeah, that's everything. That's not... I was going to say there's not a lot to talk about FNAF 6. I've officially yapped for almost an hour and 14 minutes. And we still have Ultimate Custom Night to go. But Ultimate Custom Night, honestly, there's not a whole lot. We really just learn about the Vengeful Spirit, the one you should not have killed, Michael Brooks. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Crying Child could be there. Charlie could be there, because the puppet straight up says, the others are like animals, but I am very aware. And then Lefty's all like, shh, get in here with me. You know, I think that's most of Lefty's lines are about, like, there's room for one more, or something like that. I'm like, shh. Which, considering Henry's whole thing about Charlie lifting up others into her arms, sure, it sounds threatening. But what if Charlie is actually, like, offering William a way to rest? I know that sounds insane. But maybe that's the type of person Charlie is. She's not vengeful. It's even something that Old Man Consequences says. Old Man Consequences is like, you need to leave the demons to his demons, rest your own soul. And Vengeful Spirit is like, nah. Because we see, a twitching Golden Freddy at the end. And so, like, maybe Charlie is either putting William to rest out of her own kindness of her heart, her own forgiveness, her just being a really cool, forgiving, kind person like that, or she's potentially doing it so that Michael Brooks can rest, the vengeful spirit. Because she wants everyone to be able to rest, and she knows that if William continues being tortured, that Michael Brooks won't find his rest. The one you should not have killed is a he, that was confirmed multiple times over. Also, the fact that any animatronic that appears in Ultimate Custom Night has to be known about to the one you should not have killed. Which, again, to me, would just even more evidence on the file that Crying Child is Golden Freddy. Like, I'm surprised people still argue about this, but yeah. Crying Child, Golden Freddy. To be fair, all of these animatronics are animatronics that William could have known about, and so could just be taken from William's mind anyway, but that depends on exactly what kind of, how exactly you're saying Ultimate Custom Night is made, I guess. I honestly don't think Ultimate Custom Night has a whole lot of theorizing. It confirms that Susie was the first. She has seen everything. Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot more to say about Ultimate Custom Night. Not Real Name made a real cool video about, potentially Orville's, Mr. Hippo's stories and how maybe there's some secret lore relevant to that, and maybe, like, the one you should not have killed is forcing souls to be here, which again could then imply that, Charlie trying to put William to rest is potentially not even for William, it's so that everyone else can rest. Although, based on the fact she says everyone else is like animals, and that, that William is very aware, or that she is very aware, sorry, I don't know why I said William. That she says the others are like animals, but I am very aware, could indicate that the others are just creations of the vengeful spirit. But she isn't. Her soul is actually here. She even says, like, I don't hate you, but you need to stop getting in my way. There is the theory that Michael is the one being tortured here, but I don't think so. Doesn't seem... I can't think of any time Michael got in Charlotte's way. It does seem weird that Charlotte would say, I don't hate you. But I could, you could probably explain it as her just being, again, super cool, forgiving force for good in this franchise. Just a very kind soul. Oh, yeah, there's also the confirmation of Mangle being possessed by Susie's dog, and, like, it is confirmation. It is as confirmed as I really think anything gets in this franchise, right? Like, short of being actually confirmed. Because there's a basically irrelevant set of cartoons of Freddy and Foxy trying to get at each other, and Freddy always loses, and maybe it's a metaphor for someone and William, Henry and William, Michael and William, fucking Jeff from down the street and William. But, it doesn't really matter. Also, it would imply, although I will say it would then implies that William always gets the last laugh, which again would just could be evidence on the pile of William being glitched up and burned trap. Like, he can't be put down because he always gets the last laugh because he's Foxy. But, that's if you want to take it as William and so on. But there's a point in which he's talking to the Mangle, and he's like, I'm going on vacation. Make sure to feed the dog. Oh, wait, you are the dog. Like, you are the dog. Spoken to the Mangle. That there's no way that is not confirming that the Mangle is possessed by Susie's dog. There is no way. The only other thing I will say is we see the mangle in FNAF 4. And in FNAF 4, like, the Nightmare animatronic based off of the mangle is called Nightmare Mangle. It's not like this is a prototype Funtime Foxy or a version of Funtime Foxy, because its Nightmare variant is called Nightmare Mangle, which should be a version of Toy Foxy, but whatever, I guess. So that could potentially mean maybe the Aftons had a dog, and William's first experiments with souls were putting that dog into the mangle. And then the mangle was later on turned into Funtime, or turned into Toy Foxy, and that's why Toy Foxy always falls apart, because it was actually originally created as just a dog-based experiment with souls, because William's always been batshit. And maybe that's why the Funtimes were created, because after that experiment with a dog's soul, he built the Funtimes, but then Elizabeth died, so that whole project was scrapped, and then Crime Child died, so he went off the deep end, and then probably would have killed the missing children's incident, and then Charlie. That could work. And it doesn't mean that Susie's dog has to be killed, stuffed into an animatronic that really shouldn't exist, but then I guess kind of does exist because we see it in FNAF 4. That could, that could work. Either way, it confirms that there's a dog soul in the mangle. Which dog? Unclear. But it does confirm that. And then also there's the Troy Chica ones, which seem to just be how William lured his victims. And we get an appearance of the Twisted Wolf as like a non-massive twisted version of itself. So that's cool. Wish we'd actually seen it before this point. Maybe it does imply that the Twisted Wolf had like a game counterpart that wasn't Roxanne Wolf. Maybe there was a wolf animatronic at some point, but we never see it, so maybe that's who was on stage with music now. Maybe. But yeah, otherwise I don't think. I don't think there's anything more that needs to be said for Ultimate Custom Night. It's really not a whole lot of lore. Except it confirms that Bite of 87 animatronic was Chica. Where's my beak inside your forehead? Where's my beak? Inside your forehead, of course. So that would, that's. I would describe it more as a pet of 87 than a bite, but it is her mouth hole region. So I guess you would potentially say that she caused the bite of 87. Because it's in someone's forehead, that's where you would bite of 87. And she is also the one who's used to represent William Afton in those cutscenes. And also, she might have been the one with the most agony infused into her by William Afton, and therefore the most under William Afton's control. So, But either way, it doesn't like it was not, in fact, Mangle, it was Toy Chica who caused the bite of 87. So, there you go. There's not really much else to say there. Right, about Ultimate Custom Night. There's probably one dialogue line I'm missing somewhere, though. Also, I don't see, the puppet being like, your suffering is music to me, to Michael. So no, I do just think it's William. We also hear William screaming for help in one ending. In the whole, Old Man Consequences section. We hear William literally screaming for help, so there's that. And, that's that, I think, right? Everything I wanted to say for Ultimate Custom Night. Oh, no. Well, yeah, that's everything I wanted to say for Ultimate Custom Night I've now said, but Pizzeria Simulator. There's not. It's just in the beginning section of Pizzeria Simulator. There's an appearance from the Grey Freddy, the one who presumably appears in FNAF 3. And I just wanted to say this because I learned after that video that apparently that version of Freddy is called Shadow Freddy in the files. I'm still willing to say it's a Springlock Freddy. one, it could still be a Shadow, like, Freddy. Like, Shadow Freddy doesn't necessarily have... A Shadow Freddy could be a whatever the Shadow animatronics are version of any version of Freddy. Or it could just be mislabeled. I mean, file names aren't necessarily canon, but more to the point, I still think. Like, we know there were 2 Springlock suits at a Freddy's that weren't Spring Bonnie and Fredbear. So, one of them appears to be Chica, based off of the, I believe the logbook has a Chica in it, and I would say, and I believe its endoskeleton matches what is commonly believed the Springlock endoskeleton looks like. I believe based off of Burn Trap. So, because Burn Trap's legs don't match the Glamrock, so it's probably the legs off of Spring Bonnie, and therefore would presumably that be what Springlock legs look like, and therefore we can kind of, doesn't take, it's not much of a logical leap to say that a Chica with the legs that Springlock animatronics have, the kind of like rings around the legs, is presumably a Springlock suit. So presumably there was a Springlock Chica at some point. And this grey Freddy not only doesn't exactly match up to Shadow Freddy or Golden Freddy, and it's not the same colour, but also, in this game, is seen as a fully functioning Freddy. And he's seen in a Freddy location, and he's on the human side of it, blocking the pizzas from getting to the children. He's on the human side, potentially because it's a Springlock suit being worn by a human. I mean, it's not a theory I'm like super attached to. I'm also willing to say there was just a body Springlock suit at both locations, based on some of the different coloured Bonnie images in FNAF 1, and the fact that one of them kind of looks like it could have been pictures of William Afton, with the whole creepy eye thing and the evil sneer, but I don't know, that would be kind of cool, and although they would kind of imply that a version of like Springlock Freddy was possessed at some point, which would then potentially be throwing in a whole new can of worms, but maybe it's being manipulated by another spirit, who knows. I mean, it doesn't really do anything, it just appears, so it's not like it's really there, it just kind of pops in and out. I don't know, that's just me saying there's a bit more evidence on the grey Springlock Freddy pile. So, yeah, that's everything though. That's definitely everything. Yeah, that's definitely more. Everything I have to say about both games summed up in only 1.5 hours, and this is one of the games and these was 2 of the games that I thought would have nothing to say about them. So, yeah. Wow, I can really talk when I want to, can't I? Jesus Christ. Anyway. Thank you if you've made it through this. The audio quality is probably shit. My voice has been going for a few days now. Or like sore for a few days now, so there's that. And I probably didn't really come out with anything that compelling because there's not a whole lot you can say about FNAF Section on the custom night that either isn't basically already common knowledge, isn't particularly confirmed, or isn't a theory of only a few pieces of evidence, so it's kind of, I did my best. Thanks for making it through. Last one. I mean, they're all going to come up at the same time for you, but, last one for me next. AR, Security Breach, VR, VR2, and all their DLCs. And then I'm also going to have one other video recorded to be put up a week after I initially upload the 5, so that hopefully that'll give me just a bit of wiggle room to then start getting a regular upload schedule, because these 5 have not been created even somewhat regularly. So, yeah. Thanks for watching. thanks for dealing with this. I know the visuals are not great. I know my voice is not great. And I know the audio quality probably ain't great, so thanks for dealing with this. Thanks for watching. And bye-bye.